a little boy in Baghdad, sometimes I used to lie in bed at night and try to imagine what it would be like in Israel. I dream of a white city on a hill. But what it turned out to be was this: a Mama'bara, an immigrant camp in the valley out past Tel Aviv. Families jammed into tents and tar paper shacks and little huts. As the saying goes, everybody living in his neighbor's back pocket. I used to think there must be at least 1 million of us here, but Papa says no, just 7,000. Still, sometimes it seems like 1 million. This is me, Yosef. Most of the other kids around here, they spend their days just loafing in the streets. But not me. In the morning, I pack up my tools and go looking for work. I can do all kinds of little jobs. Fix a Primus stove, mend a broken chair. I keep a sharp eye out for bolts and screws, old wheels, bent nails, odds and ends lying around. You'd be surprised the things people throw away. I remember the day I found an old baby carriage. To some people it might have looked like just a piece of junk, but in a couple of hours patching it up, I made myself a fine wagon. To tell you the truth, ever since I was a child, I was always happiest with a tool in my hand. Taking something apart, repairing something, fixing it, finding out how it works. My father always says the main thing is for a man to be able to earn his own living. I guess the best thing I owned in the world was the bunch of old tools I'd managed to scrape together one by one. I mean, I don't know, they gave me a kind of feeling of independence. Like I could earn my own way. The end of the day, I'd come home to our tent at the edge of the camp. My mother would be sitting outside with my baby sister Miriam. Out in the back, Papa would be digging in the field trying to make himself a garden. Working out there 10 hours a day to raise a few beans to sell in the marketplace. It wasn't so easy living in the camp, but I never heard Papa complain. Sometimes he even smiled. A funny kind of smile that would make me want to say, "Don't worry, Papa. Everything's going to be all right." Money was always a problem, and every little bit helped. I guess it was how much we needed a little extra money that gave me the idea of going into business. I got up one morning and I had it all figured out. I remember it was very special that day, almost like a bar mitzvah. My father found me a jacket somewhere, and my mother gave me a smile for good luck. I set out my stock the way I'd seen them do it in the marketplace. Stuff I'd been collecting for weeks. All sorts of valuable pots and kettles. A couple of spoons, only slightly bent. Box of buttons. And some old dresses my mother had washed and patched. I couldn't have felt prouder if I'd owned the fanciest shop in Jerusalem. And I started off to make myself a fortune. The first couple of hours weren't exactly what you'd call a rushing business. I walked my feet off, and by noon I was still looking for my first customer. And then, hallelujah. Here you are, lady. A perfect fit. Made in heaven for you. How about this one? Makes you look like you just danced out of the Song of Solomon. As the Lord is my witness, it's... No. Turned out being a businessman wasn't as easy as I thought. By 2 o'clock, it seemed like I'd been out for a year. And then about 3, old Mrs. Ben Levy came by. And at last, I made my first sale. She gave me half a pound for a sweater, and I felt like I was king of the world. I felt like I was really getting somewhere. I passed by Shlomo, the kid from our old street back in Baghdad. And I remember the look in his eyes, like he wished he was me. At the end of the day, I walked down to the marketplace. All I'd made was that one sale, that half a pound burning a hole in my pocket. My first day in business, I felt the least I could do was buy something to celebrate. I wished I could get a pair of shoes for my father, only I didn't have nearly enough. I finally settled for an orange to take home to the baby. The next day, early morning, I started out again, but there wasn't much business. I remember the Youth Aliyah truck came rolling in on its weekly trip to pick up the kids who'd been chosen to go to the children's villages. They used to come and take a group at a time, as many as they had room for. So many of us had been waiting for so long that I'd begun to feel my turn would never come. Watching them pile in the truck, I had the funniest feeling. I guess I was probably jealous. There they were, going off to a new life in the Sharon, or maybe Galilee. The only place I'd ever traveled in my life was from Baghdad to Lydda. This one Mama'bara was about all I'd ever seen of Israel. The driver started to tinker with the motor. He took out some tools. I remember they seemed the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. As I watched him, I kept wondering, what's that gadget there? What's that? How does it work? What makes it go? Just beginning to leave when I saw it. I stared at it, shining there in the sun. To me, it was more than just a tool. It was, I don't know, part of a wonderful life that went on somewhere outside our crowded camp. Afterwards, I finally figured out what it was. A little set of wrenches. I told myself, don't be a fool, it's not yours. That truck will be coming back again next week and you'll have to return it. Yet all I could think of was how fine it would be to keep it. How many jobs I'd be able to do with it. Like old Saida's sewing machine that had been broken for weeks. And I'd never had the right tools to fix it. wrenches worked like a charm. I was almost ready to give up my pushcart and go back to being a repairman. And the days passed and the youth Aliyah truck came back again on its weekly trip. The moment I saw it, I wanted to turn and run. I don't know what kept me just standing there. I kept telling myself, run, run. And instead I found myself going over there to give back that beautiful tool. Funny thing, I remember he wasn't even angry. He spoke to me in a kind of gentle voice and with a smile that made me not even afraid to tell him who I was and where I lived. I don't know what I expected to happen after that. The last thing in the world I ever dreamed was that he would stop by our tent that afternoon to talk about youth Aliyah. To sit there making jokes with my father and tell us about a place they called Neve Hadassah, a sort of children's village. I remember him saying, there's no future for a boy here in the camp. This isn't the real Israel. The real Israel is out there, where the tractors are plowing the green fields. It all ended by my mother and father deciding to let me go to the place they called a children's village. I'll never forget that first day. The scared feeling I had, as though they were all looking at me like a stranger from another world. There were children all around, and yet I felt so lonely. The next morning, bright and early after breakfast, we started out to the fields. I guess I had all kinds of wild ideas of what this new life would be like. I imagined myself learning to fix engines, to drive a tractor. Instead, they handed me a hoe, just like the one my father used back in the Mama'bara. I remember the disappointment, the way I walked out to the fields thinking, what a fool I was, me and my dreams. I'm right back where I started. Oh, there were machines, all right. Marvelous machines. But I was kept busy at 100 odd jobs. For the first time in my life, there was a regular routine to the day. 4 hours of study, 4 hours of work. I began to understand what they meant when they called it a children's village. The teachers were there to help us, but we were the ones who made it run. while, those tractors working out there so close I could almost reach out and touch them. But I spent my work hours with nothing more mechanical than the cackling of chickens. Sometimes I'd stop for a second and look out at those tractors. And I wondered, why don't they give me a chance? And the days went on, passing into weeks. Alongside the others, I bent my back over the earth, planting the long rows, the April sun beating down on me. I remember that day I lay down and dreamed I was driving a blue machine across a golden field. The engine roared in the bright air, and it all seemed so real. It was a good life. It was 1,000 times better than the immigrant camp. I was getting an education, learning new skills, discovering all sorts of things I never knew existed. The whole village was our classroom, the fields and the groves and the school. So many new things to learn, things I never dreamed of back in Baghdad. Botany and chemistry, history and grammar. And after classes there were basketball games and dances and even an orchestra. I remember it was having a rehearsal that day. I could hear the sound of the music echoing on the wind, and the teacher yelling instructions, and Shoshana was singing. We slipped away down the back slope, me and Avram. We cut through the back path toward a place I'd heard about before, but never gone to. The tractor shed. We turned the corner, and there she stood, a little blue beauty. I walked toward it, and it was like, I don't know, like I'd finally found where I belonged. I reached out and touched it, and my heart began to pound. My throat was all dry. After that, every spare minute I had, I ran out to find Yigal and that tractor. I followed him everywhere. He didn't seem to mind being pestered. As for me, every word he said became my private Bible. I'd hear the words once and know them by heart. Gear shift and spark plugs, battery and carburetor. I memorized it, like it was a poem. After that, I didn't mind the hours in the field. The time seemed to fly. Morning and night, my mind was full of that tractor. I did my work. I studied my lessons. But every moment of the day, I could hear the roar of that tractor, like a song. I'd look at a tree and hear a tractor. I'd look at a side and hear a tractor. I'll never forget the first day Yigal let me try it. After waiting for so long, I sat up there and I was suddenly a little scared. When Yigal drove it, it looked so simple. But with me at the wheel, it began to jump and skip like a drunken camel. But after a while, I began to catch the knack of it. I remember those first days. I felt like King David on his throne. I kept thinking, how I wish my father could see me now. I remember it was a Monday. I went to mail call, and there was a letter. These last weeks, the Mama'bara had faded like a dim dream. It seemed like another life, another century. And then, suddenly, it was right there in my hand, the slanting scrawl of my father's handwriting. We'll be coming to visit you soon, maybe next week. Mama and me and the baby will be coming. Do you know what it's like to have a dream for years, and suddenly have it start to come true? Do you know what it's like to come from the gutters of a back alley in Baghdad and end up driving a blue machine toward a golden field? Well, I can tell you. It's like... No, it's no use. I can't tell you. It's a kind of feeling either you can understand without words, or it's no use my trying to explain. I remember I was out with Yigal driving in the fields the day they came. Shalom, Papa. Shalom, Mama. Little Miriam, shalom. Do you remember your brother? I'd come a long way from Baghdad. I'd come a long way from that tent in that dusty camp. Oh, the things I'd learned since then. I had the skill now to help build a green country, to help build a future for you, little Miriam. Then I started to drive with them watching me, and that look in Mama's eyes, that smile on Papa's lips, as though he was saying to the whole world, you see, it was worth it. The long journey and the weary months in the camp, it was worth it. It was the strangest thing. All of a sudden I could see the Mama'bara. I could see the dusty streets and all the children I'd known there. I saw the face of Shlomo rise up before me, and it seemed as though he was asking, what about me? What about all of them back there? Little Moshe and Itzhak and Aviva, wasting their days in the streets. I remember I drove along with the song of the motor in my ears, and inside me the memory of those others back there in the camp. And I felt like crying out. Give them a chance, too.